I thought I was just doing a simple favor, water her plants, collect her mail, and maybe wave to her through the window next week. But that note she left on her kitchen table, it flipped everything I thought I knew about her and myself on its head. What started with a neighborly gesture turned into an unraveling of secrets, regrets, and something that might just be the beginning of a second chance neither of us saw coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. It started 3 Thursdays ago, right after dinner. The air in Willow Ridge that time of year always smelled like sun-warmed earth and cut grass, and I had just stepped back inside from sweeping my porch when I heard a knock on my door. Not the hurried kind of knock you hear from a delivery driver or a salesperson, but a polite, almost nervous tap. I opened it to find Lorraine, my neighbor, from 3 doors down. She was holding a clay pot with sprigs of basil peeking out and a yellow envelope tucked under her arm. Lorraine was in her early 50s, always impeccably dressed in blouses with flowered cuffs and denim that never wrinkled even when she gardened. She smiled like she'd been meaning to ask me something for a long time and only just built the courage. "Hey," she began, voice soft but clear. "I'm heading out of town for a bit. Family stuff. Nothing serious," she added quickly, though I hadn't asked. "Do you mind checking in on the house while I'm gone? Water the plants, maybe collect the mail." Of course I agreed. Lorraine had always been kind in that quiet, neighborly ways, sharing tomatoes from her garden, offering books she'd finished, keeping to herself but never aloof. And besides, I'd been meaning to get out of my routine. Early evenings were the hardest since my dad passed last winter. The silence of the house had become something heavy. She handed me the envelope, told me it had keys and a few notes, and thanked me again before heading off with that same quiet urgency. I watched her walk down the driveway and turn the corner before I stepped back inside, holding the envelope like it had more weight than it should. I didn't open it right away. Something about the way she handed it to me made me want to give. At time, I left it on my kitchen counter next to the fruit bowl, glanced at it every so often over the weekend. And finally, on Sunday afternoon, I decided to go over to her place and get started. The heat was dry and the sun high, so I brought my own watering can and gloves, assuming her plants would be dry and wilting. Her house looked the same as always, white siding, blue shutters, ceramic wind chimes tapping gently near the porch. I let myself in with the key, stepped into the stillness, and was immediately struck by the smell of lavender and lemon oil. Her living room was tidy, with a quilt thrown over the back of the couch and a cup of tea still sitting cold on the side. Table. A hardcover novel was open face down like she had left in the middle of a chapter. It didn't feel like a vacation house. It felt like a home someone had just stepped out of, maybe to take a call. I watered the ferns by the window, checked the philodendrons hanging in the kitchen, made my way to the back patio where her tomato plants leaned tiredly against their stakes. It was peaceful, work, predative, grounding. I found myself humming, even smiling.
Right.
And then I stepped back inside to place the watering can by the door, and that's when I noticed the note. It wasn't inside the envelope. This one was separate folded and placed neatly on the kitchen table. My name was written in blue ink, slanted and careful. The kind of penmanship you see on birthday cards from a favorite aunt. I hesitated. It felt like a boundary was being crossed even though she had left it there for me. I opened it. It began simply enough. "Thank you again, Mark. I know this might seem like just a small thing, but it means more than you know." And then the tone shifted. I needed to leave town quickly, but not because of an emergency. I just needed to breathe somewhere else. I've lived here for years and still feel like a stranger in my own home. There are things I've kept hidden, not dangerous, just personal. If anything in the house feels unusual or out of place, I ask that you trust your instincts. Please water the orchids in the guest room. They're special to me. They're tied to someone I used to be. Last sentence hit something in me. Like someone I used to be. I folded the note slowly, like it might break if I rushed. I glanced down the hallway. I hadn't even noticed there was a guest room. The rest of the day felt quieter, heavier somehow. The way she said, used to be like she wasn't just talking about the past, but about a whole identity she had buried. I'd always seen Lorraine as composed, maybe even private, but not sad, not hollow. That night I couldn't sleep. Kept wondering what she meant. Why those orchids? Why now? I told myself I'd go back the next day, check on the guest room, and finish the rest of the watering. But deep down, I knew this had become more than just a neighborly favor. Something in that house wanted to be seen. Something was waiting, preparing. And narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The next morning. The sky was still the color of ash and slate when I stepped out, the air thick with that scent you get just before a summer storm. I took my time walking the short distance to Lorraine's house, the note from yesterday tucked deep into the back of my mind, but never fully out of reach. I told myself I was simply finishing the favor I'd started, but in truth, I felt pulled toward that guest room, like it held a puzzle piece I didn't know I'd been missing. The key turned easily in the lock, and I entered the house once more. The living room was just as she left it, the faint scent of lemon and lavender still hanging in the air. Only now there was a chill under it, a kind of stillness that didn't feel quite like silence, but rather like a held breath. I passed the couch and the unfinished cup of tea. Stepping carefully down the hallway, each floorboard creaking softly as if whispering secrets from beneath the hardwood, I paused in front of the guest room. The door was closed, unlike the rest of the room she had left open. That alone made it feel different, like it was sealing something in. I wrapped my hand around the brass knob and turned. The door opened without resistance. Inside, the room was dim, though the curtains were pulled halfway open, letting in thin bands of light that stretched across the floor like ribbons. The bed was made tightly, corners tucked military style. A single chair sat near the window with a cushion so worn it must have seen years of use. But what caught my eye were the orchids. 3 pots, lined neatly on a windowsill shelf. There, blooms full and soft, violet and white petals unfurling like they were mid-sigh. They looked freshly watered, oddly vibrant, as though someone had tended to them just yesterday, which I knew wasn't true. Lorraine hadn't mentioned anyone else. Coming by, I approached slowly like I might startle them. The air around them smelled faintly of rose water, and something sweet I couldn't quite place, maybe cinnamon or almond. A woman younger than Lorraine, smiling broadly, with a man beside her, bearded, his arms slung protectively around her shoulders. They were standing in what looked like a greenhouse, surrounded by more orchids, hundreds of them. I picked up the frame gently, examined the corners for dust, for clues, but it was spotless. Behind it lay a second envelope.
No name this time.
Just a single word handwritten in tiny script. Remember. Didn't open it right away. I placed the photo down, careful to return it exactly where it had been, and sat on the edge of the bed. The envelope felt warm from the light. I turned it over in my hands once, twice, then slipped my finger under the seal and opened it. There were 3 sheets of paper inside, written in the same delicate handwriting as the note from the kitchen. The words weren't addressed to me, or to anyone specific. They read more like a diary entry, fragments of thought, memory, regret. I used to think I had time, that the worst thing about aging would be the aching joints or the graying hair. But it's not. It's the silences, the empty rooms, the people you once loved fading into the wallpaper. I kept these orchids alive because I couldn't keep him. I couldn't keep her. I watered them like I should have watered our connection. But I let it all dry out. There was more. Mentions of names I didn't recognize. Amelia Jack. A line that read, "Sometimes I come in here and pretend she's still just in the garden, just a few minutes from coming back inside." I read that line 3 times. The room suddenly felt colder. I looked around again, this time with new eyes. The neatly made bed, the worn cushion, the absence of dust on the window shelf, the fact that the orchids were thriving while the other plants had begun to droop. Someone had been here often, recently. Or Lorraine had come in here daily, quietly tending to this space like a shrine. A sharp gust of wind rattled the glass, and I flinched, the photo frame tipping over slightly on the table. I reached to steady it and noticed a small label on the back. Greenhouse 14, Letcher County Arboretum. It meant nothing to me, but I made a note of it in my phone. I was beginning to feel like I'd walked into a story already halfway written. I was trying to catch up on the chapters I'd missed. I left the guest room with the envelope tucked in my back pocket and returned to the kitchen. I watered the indoor herbs she kept above the sink and stepped onto the back patio once more, refilling the soil around the tomatoes and basil, but I couldn't shake the weight of what I'd read. As I walked home that afternoon, the sky broke open with slow, steady rain. My shirt stuck to my back. My sneakers splashed through shallow puddles, but I hardly noticed. My mind was on Lorraine, on the orchids, on the empty room that didn't feel empty at all. I thought of the phrase she had written in the first note there, tied to someone I used to be. Was she mourning someone she'd lost, or a version of herself that had vanished in the process? I spent the evening reading up on orchids, something I never thought I'd do. Their symbolism, their care, their resilience. Some varieties can live for decades, blooming in cycles, clinging to life in even the most hostile conditions. A paragraph from one article stood out to me. Orchids are often seen as symbols of enduring love and rare beauty. Beneath their delicate appearance lies a stubborn will to live. That felt like Lorraine. That felt like the room she had left behind. Next day I returned, not to water the plants this time, but to see what else the house might whisper. I wasn't sure what I was searching for exactly, maybe answers, maybe just pieces of a woman I had never truly known. But I knew one thing for sure. This was no longer just a favor. It was the beginning of something much deeper, and I couldn't walk away from it now. By the third morning, the house no longer felt unfamiliar. There was a kind of rhythm to it now, the soft creak of the door when I let myself in, the way sunlight touched the kitchen counter at a particular angle around 9, the hum of the refrigerator that seemed louder than it should have been in, the quiet. I had started to move more comfortably, not like an intruder anymore, but as if I were carefully walking through someone else's memories. Every object in that house had weight to it now, meaning layered beneath the mundane. The books on the coffee table weren't just there for decoration, they were well-read, dog-eared, bookmarked with grocery receipts and faded photos. The throw blanket wasn't just a cozy touch, but a worn comfort, stitched with initials and a style that looked like it was done by hand. And I began noticing small, telling details I'd overlooked at first. A pair of gardening gloves frayed at the fingertips, resting beside a stack of unpaid property tax envelopes. A dried smear of paint on the light switch near the laundry room. A single ballet slipper, child-sized, tucked behind a row of cleaning supplies beneath the hallway cabinet. I found myself returning to the guest room before doing anything else. The orchids remained healthy, standing like sentinels in their white ceramic pots. Their leaves glistened with moisture, which made me wonder again how they were surviving so well if Lorraine had left. Someone had to be tending them in between my visits, or else they were remarkably self-sufficient. I gently touched one of the leaves, just to feel its texture, and that same sweet scent from before lingered faintly in the air, more memory than fragrance. I stood there longer than I meant to, studying the framed photo again. This time, I noticed something new, a reflection in the glass. It's not mine, but captured in the photo itself, behind the man and woman smiling in the greenhouse, a child. Barely visible in the background, standing among the orchids. A girl, maybe 10 or 11, with hair pulled into a high ponytail. She wasn't smiling. Her expression was distant, her gaze turned slightly away from the camera, as if she hadn't meant to be in the shot at all. It was subtle, easy to miss unless you were looking for it. But now that I'd seen her, I couldn't stop thinking about her. Who was she? Why hadn't Lorraine mentioned a daughter or a niece? Had the room once belonged to that girl? The ballet slipper, the cushion by the window, the sense of preservation, it all started aligning. Not into answers, but into a clearer shape of a mystery. I returned to the kitchen to check the mail Lorraine had asked me to collect. A stack had built. Up on the small foyer table, utility bills, a postcard from Vermont, a brown envelope marked confidential. I didn't open anything, of course. but I sorted it all neatly and moved it into a drawer so the clutter wouldn't collect. Oh, that's when I saw it. Tucked under the last piece of mail was a second postcard, this one not addressed. Number writing on the back. It's just an image of a lake, still and blue, surrounded by pine trees under a fading sunset. On the edge of the lake, a tiny figure sat with their feet in the water. On the bottom corner, in tiny cursive font, it read, Lake Miriam, Upstate NY. The name didn't mean anything to me at first, but the handwriting on the bottom left corner of the image did. It was Loren's. She had written one word, remember, the same word that had appeared on the envelope in the guest room. I slid the card into my pocket. This felt deliberate, like she was leaving breadcrumbs. Or maybe she didn't know I would find them, but part of her wanted someone too. I stepped out onto the back patio again, standing in the late morning sun. The tomatoes were finally looking fuller, their vines heavy with fruit, and I took my time watering them. I tried to center myself, to shake off the unease that had started to follow me home each night like a ghost clinging to my coat. I had never been someone who invited mystery. I lived a simple life, rooted in routine, or Lee. Mornings, spreadsheets, grocery store runs, the occasional takeout and phone calls with my sister. I wasn't built for secrets. But Lorraine had given me something I didn't know I'd needed. It's not just curiosity, but a reason to notice, to look closer. To wonder about someone else's world. That afternoon, after I returned to my house, I dug out an old shoebox from my closet filled with travel brochures. Notes and clippings I'd saved during a road trip phase I'd gone through years ago. I was hoping, on the off chance, that Lake Miriam had come up somewhere before. It hadn't. But the act of looking, of piecing something together, gave me purpose. That evening, I sat on my porch again, and for the first time in months, I felt something akin to anticipation. The kind you get before a storm, not dread, but electricity in the air. I dreamed of the house that night. Not in a terrifying way, but vividly. I was walking down the hallway again, the orchids glowing faintly, their petals whispering my name. When I opened the guest room door, it was no longer empty. The child from the photo sat cross-legged on the bed, braiding strings of dried lavender. She looked up, her eyes the same color as Lorraine's, and said, "You're almost there." I woke up with my heart hammering, the image seared into my memory. The next morning, I returned with a journal in hand. I figured if Lorraine had left, pieces of her story scattered across her home, I should start documenting them, mapping connections, no matter how fragile they seemed. I began by listing everything I knew: the orchids, the greenhouse photo, the mention of Jack and Amelia, the postcard of Lake Miriam, the guest room's untouched quality, the ballet slipper, the letters about silence and time and regret. I reread her note again, letting each line settle deeper. I needed to breathe somewhere else, she had written. That line echoed louder now, as though she hadn't just left town, but left something behind entirely, perhaps even fled from it. Returned to the guest room once more, standing in the threshold like a visitor at a sacred site. I whispered a promise I hadn't planned. I'll figure this out. Didn't know who I was saying it to. Lorraine, the girl in the photo. Myself, maybe. But the words came out like a vow, and something about saying them aloud made the air in the room feel lighter. It was only then that I noticed something I hadn't before. Tucked beneath the cushion on the window chair was a library book, dusty, barely hanging together at the spine. A bookmark inside a ticket stub. Amelia's ballet recital, June 12th, row 4, seat B. And there it was. A name connected to a memory. A girl who once danced, whose room was frozen in time. A woman who couldn't forget, even as the world moved on. I was stepping into the pages of someone's unfinished story, and something told me it had only just begun. By the time the weekend rolled in, I found myself rearranging my daily plans just to carve out space for Loren's house. It was no longer about doing a neighborly duty. It had become a quiet investigation, a ritual of sorts, like retracing someone's footprints in soft sand before the tide erased them. I couldn't shake the feeling that Lorraine wanted someone to find all of this. She hadn't just left a note. She had left a trail. and I was following it, cautiously but willingly. That morning, I brought coffee with me in a thermos and a fresh notepad to add to the journal I'd started the day before. I approached the house as if it were still occupied, greeting it with the same nod I'd offer a friend, unlocking the front door slowly so it wouldn't creak too loud, as if the silence inside was a living thing that didn't want to be disturbed too suddenly. The air was cooler that day, even indoors. Maybe it was just my nerves, or maybe it was the fact that I had started to build theories. The girl in the photo, Amelia Mustov, been Lorraine's daughter. The ballet slipper, the ticket stub from the recital, the mention of her in that note, everything pointed towards someone young, someone who had once lived in that house and left an echo behind. But the silence around her absence was what puzzled me most. There were no photographs of her in the living room, no framed certificates, no toys, no drawings on the fridge. Only that room, perfectly preserved, like a memory that refused to die. I wondered what had happened. I didn't want to assume the worst, but the tenderness with which Lorraine had written about the orchids, about watering what she couldn't, Savit haunted me. That day, I chose to explore more of the house beyond the usual spaces. I moved carefully, opening drawers not out of nosiness but with a strange reverence, hoping I might stumble upon more threads to follow. In a small drawer beneath the television console, I found an old key ring with 3 mismatched keys and a plastic tag that read shed. I hadn't even noticed a shed. I looked out through the kitchen window, and sure enough, half hidden behind the overgrown hedges, was a narrow structure with a rusted roof and wooden frame. It looked more like an old storage hut than a modern shed, the kind of thing you'd expect to see in a forgotten backyard. I hesitated. I'd already crossed some invisible line, moving through someone's house like a historian rather than a neighbor. But the shed beckoned like the next chapter of a novel you couldn't stop reading. I grabbed the keyring and stepped outside. The shed's door protested when I opened it, its hinges squealing after likely years of disuse. Inside, it smelled of old soil, pine, and thyme. Garden tools leaned against one wall, and pots were stacked in uneven towers in the corners. In the center of the shed was a long wooden bench covered with a faded cloth. I pulled it back to reveal rows of labeled jars and notebooks, each carefully arranged. The labels read things like Winter Orchid Mix, Propagation Test, 2004, Jack's Mixture Do Not Toss. There it was again, Jack, that name from the letter. I reached for one of the notebooks and opened it. The pages were filled with delicate sketches of flowers, notes on humidity and light exposure, and at the bottom of some pages, small annotations. Amelia helped today, said the soil felt like cake flour. She laughed. My chest tightened. These weren't just gardening notes. They were memories, cataloged beside the practical, as if Lorraine had tried to make sure her daughter lived on in the margins. I flipped further through the pages, reading passages out of order. Jack says we should enter the hybrid orchid into the spring fair. Amelia doesn't want to dance anymore, says it hurts to pretend to smile. I don't know what to do with that. That line stayed with me. I closed the book gently and sat down on the bench, letting the weight of everything settle. His family had been full of life once, gardening together, dancing, dreaming of fairs. But something had splintered. Jack wasn't here anymore. Amelia was a ghost in her own home. Lorraine had packed all of it away in a shed and buried it under routine. I wondered what it cost her to lock this place up. How many nights she came out here to sit among these quiet remains. Back inside, I returned to the guest room and looked again for anything I'd missed. This time I opened the closet. It was mostly empty, save for one box on the top shelf. Pulled it down carefully. Inside were ballet programs, birthday cards, a half-used bottle of glitter glue, and a music box in the shape of a swan. I wound it. The soft, tinny melody filled the room, something delicate and faintly familiar. A lullaby, maybe? Ah, shit. Tucked beneath the programs was a stack of letters, bundled with string. I didn't read them yet. I wasn't ready. Just holding them felt like holding someone's heart. When I left that day, I didn't take anything with me. But the sound of the music box, still echoing in my head. It stayed with me through the walk home, through dinner. Even through the silence of my living room where my own family photo sat in frames on the shelf. Faces I saw often, but stories I hadn't thought about in ages. Lorraine's world had become a mirror of my own regrets. Not because I had a child I'd lost or a partner who vanished, but because I'd gone so long without asking anyone else's story, without really listening. The morning after discovering the letters in the box, I didn't wake up to an alarm, or the sun leaking through my curtains, but rather to an overwhelming feeling in my chest, like a tug toward something unfinished. The kind of sensation that doesn't allow for casual coffee sipping or scrolling through the news. I got dressed and walked over to Lorraine's house without even checking the time. It was early. The dew still clung to the grass and the sky, wore a pale pink hue that hadn't quite warmed into daylight yet. I let myself in like I had been doing for the past few days, and though I moved quietly, it struck me how familiar the place had become, how the creaks in the hallway no longer startled me, how my body already knew which step dipped slightly lower than the others, how the air carried the faintest trace of vanilla and cedar, and how that scent had started to remind me of something like comfort. Today, I didn't go straight to the guest room. I sat in the kitchen first, poured myself a glass of water, and stood by the sink. Looking out over the small backyard where the tomatoes were ripening in rows, I thought about how Lorraine had taken the time to write that first note, how it seemed like such a small task water my plant's butt had unraveled into something so much deeper, so deliberate. I took the stack of letters I had left untouched yesterday and brought them to the kitchen table. One by one, I began to read them. The handwriting changed from letter to letter. Some were Lorraine's, flowing and neat, peppered with corrections, and underlined phrases for emphasis. Others were written in a child's hand, slanted, with uneven lines, decorated with little hearts or flowers in the margins. The first letter I opened was addressed to Mommy. It began with a note about a school project and ended with, "I love you, even if you're mad." The simplicity of that line felt like someone knocking gently on my ribs. Another letter, older and folded more crisply, was Lorraine writing to Jack. It was dated over 2 decades ago. "I know you needed time and I've tried to understand it, but how do I explain your silence to Amelia? How do I explain it to myself?" Her words trembled with frustration, not in their content, but in the way she circled them again and again with her pen. Leaving behind a visible pressure on the paper, she had kept writing to him, I realized. Not just then, but years. Later too, letter after letter, none mailed, none returned. They weren't about reconnection. They were confessions, musings, grief made tangible on paper. I lost track of time as I read. The sun had climbed higher by the time I finally reached the last letter in the bundle. It was sealed in a small white envelope, its paper different. From the others, thicker, almost like stationery used for weddings or anniversaries. On the front, it said simply, "To whoever finds this." My fingers hesitated before tearing the flap open. Inside, Lorraine's handwriting was tight and meticulous. "If you're reading this, then maybe you've been piecing it together. I don't know if you're a stranger or someone I used to know, but I want to believe someone might care enough to follow the breadcrumbs. I didn't mean to make my life a mystery. I just didn't know where to place all the pieces. Amelia was my daughter. Jack was her father. He left when she was 8, said he couldn't stay in a house that reminded him of his mother's death. I never understood that. Amelia stopped dancing when he left. She stopped speaking to me for a time, too. I tried to fill the silence with orchids, tried to plant beauty where she was withering. But children don't grow like flowers. They break differently." I paused and reread that line again. Break differently. Lorraine's next words explained that Amelia left home at 17. No address, no calls. I got a letter from her 2 years later. One line, "I'm okay. Don't look for me." And so I didn't. But I waited. I kept her room the same. I watered her plants. I left the ticket stub in the closet because it still smelled like her perfume. Lorraine admitted that her leaving town wasn't spontaneous. Had gone camping once when she was 9. It's the only place I ever saw her look like she belonged in her own skin. Maybe she'll remember that if she ever returns here and finds this. Maybe she'll know I never stopped waiting. I folded the letter gently and held it for a while, resting my forehead against the cool wood of the table. Lorraine had left so much behind, not just things, but pieces of her heart buried inside drawers. Wedged into old ticket stubs and pressed into the petals of orchids that continued to bloom in the silence. Her absence wasn't abandonment. It was grief finding its way to a quieter place to rest. I sat up straight and exhaled. That second CTA Lorraine had written in her letter had echoed something inside me. She wanted someone to care, someone to carry her story forward. It was then I remembered the postcard of Lake Miriam. I pulled it from my bag and flipped it over again. The photograph seemed ordinary, just a lake surrounded by pines, but now it radiated significance. Looked up directions to Lake Miriam on my phone. It wasn't far. A 4-hour drive, maybe 5, depending on the route. I stood in Lorraine's kitchen, thinking about how the house felt like a heart paused mid-beat, and I knew I had to see the lake for myself. Not because I expected to find her there, but because I needed to understand why she chose that place as her ending, or maybe her beginning. I returned to the guest room once more before leaving, brushing my fingers along the orchid's petals like saying goodbye. In the corner of the room, beside the closet, I noticed a pair of shoes, simple sneakers, worn and neatly aligned, like they were waiting to be slipped on again. I smiled softly, then turned out the light and shut the door behind me. Back at my house, I packed an overnight bag and scribbled a note for my sister, letting her know I'd be off-grid for a day or two, just in case. I didn't tell her why, didn't quite know how to explain it yet, but deep down, I felt the shift. What began as a casual favor had grown into something far more intimate. I was chasing a story that had been abandoned in silence. Something told me the most important page was waiting just a few hours north, beside a lake that had once made a child feel like herself again. The road to Lake Miriam unfurled like a forgotten ribbon through the trees, winding past sleepy towns and silent gas stations that seemed frozen in time. I drove with the windows cracked open, letting in the crisp, pine-laced air that deepened as I moved further from the city and closer to something both ancient and tender. My thoughts drifted with the wind, following the curve of each hill, the bend of each turn, and with every mile that passed, I felt as though I were shedding a layer of distance, not just in geography, but in spirit. Lorraine had come this way once, maybe more than once. She had chosen this place as her destination, and I was beginning to understand why. The deeper I drove into the wilderness, the quieter the world became. There were fewer distractions, fewer signs of the frantic modern life I was used to, and in that absence, strange clarity took hold. By the time I pulled into the gravel turnout near the lake, the sun was sitting low behind the hills, casting long amber shadows across the water's surface. Lake Miriam stretched wide and calm before me, its edges wrapped in towering evergreens, their tips still catching the last gold threads of daylight. I stepped out of the car slowly, letting the crunch of gravel beneath my shoes break the silence. The air smelled of moss and aged wood, and something else, maybe memory. I didn't bring much with me. Just a notebook, Lorraine's letter, the postcard, and a single water bottle. I didn't know how long I'd be there. I didn't know what I expected to find, but it felt like sacred ground. It felt like walking into the heart of a secret that had waited patiently to be heard. The path along the shoreline was narrow, barely more than a worn trail marked by flattened grass and the occasional broken twig. I followed it instinctively, eyes scanning for anything, a figure, a marker, a clue. After about 10 minutes of walking, I came across a small clearing where a wooden bench faced the water. It was old, worn smooth by years of rain and wind, but sturdy. On its surface, initials had been carved L+A Lorraine and Amelia. My breath caught. She had been here. Recently, maybe, or long ago. The letters weren't weathered beyond recognition, so it couldn't have been that long. I sat down slowly, running my fingers across the grooves of their names as if touching them might conjure something from the ether. The lake was perfectly still. Not a single ripple disturbed its surface, and the trees reflected across it like a painted canvas. I sat there for what might have been an hour, listening. Listening not for footsteps or voices, but for something internal, a shift, a message, an understanding that hadn't yet crystallized. Eventually, I pulled out Lorraine's letter and read it again, this time aloud, my voice low and even. It felt like speaking into a cathedral. Each word hung in the air, hovering for a moment before vanishing into the hush of the forest. What? When? I finished. I folded the letter and placed it beside me on the bench. I didn't cry. I didn't know why I thought I might. Instead, I felt this strange warmth, like I had carried someone else's weight far enough that they could finally set. It downed as dusk deepened. I stood and walked further along the trail until I found a small dock extending out over the water. Its wood creaked gently beneath my feet as I stepped onto it. I stood at the edge, staring down into the lake's mirrored surface. My reflection looked tired, but peaceful. I thought about Amelia. I thought about her laughter caught in a journal's margin. I thought about a recital ticket, a pair of shoes waiting silently by a closet door, a photo where she stood behind her parents but didn't quite fit into the frame. I didn't know where she was now, didn't know if she'd ever return, but for a moment I believed she had been here. That this place had held her the way Lorraine's letters had, quietly, gently, without expectation. I made camp near the clearing, laying out a blanket and pulling on a jacket as the temperature dropped. The stars arrived slowly, shy at first, then boldly flooding the sky with pinpricks of cold fire. The silence was total. No cars, no phones, no hum of electronics, only the sound of crickets and my own breath. I fell asleep with Lorraine's name in my mind, and I dreamt of a garden filled with orchids that never wilted, where a woman stood holding the hand of a girl with bright eyes, their feet bare in the grass, smiling not for the camera, but because they were finally seen. I awoke at dawn, dew clinging to my jacket, the lake still cloaked in a veil of mist. I stood and stretched, then walked to the bench again. There was something there, a folded piece of paper resting beneath a stone, weathered around the edges, but dry. My hands trembled slightly as I picked it up, but it wasn't addressed, just a simple note written in the same handwriting as the other letters. If you've come all this way, thank you. You've done more than you know. Some stories aren't meant to be solved, they're meant to be carried. Please take care of the house until I can. Well, I didn't know how to feel. It was like hearing someone whisper through time. Lorraine had been here, recently. The ink wasn't smudged, the paper hadn't yellowed. And more importantly, she had known someone might come. She had left that hope behind, even if she hadn't fully believed in it. I tucked the note into my journal and sat back down on the bench. The weight of the journey, the days spent unraveling, someone else's life, pressed into me, and yet I felt lighter, not because I had answers, but because I had witnessed something real on the drive back. The trees no longer looked foreboding. The road no longer seemed lonely. I was returning not with closure, but with a kind of quiet understanding that people leave things behind for all kinds of reasons. But sometimes, just sometimes, they leave them in the hope that someone like you might pick them up. That night, back in my own house, I sat at my desk and wrote Lorraine a letter. I told her the orchids were still thriving, that Amelia's room remained untouched, that the tomatoes were nearly ready to be picked. I didn't expect her to read it, but like her, I believed some words deserved to be spoken, even if only to the silence. The days that followed felt different, like the world had tilted just enough to reveal something new beneath the surface of ordinary life. I found myself returning to Lorraine's house, not out of obligation, but out of an unspoken need. The orchids, despite their delicate appearance, seemed to thrive under my care, their petals unfolding like tiny miracles every day. I began to notice little details I'd overlooked before, the way the sunlight hit the windowsill in the afternoon, the faint scent of vanilla that lingered on the curtains, the soft hum of the refrigerator that somehow felt comforting instead of mechanical. The house was no longer just a space to water plants. It was a repository of memories, of hopes, of heartbreaks, quietly stitched together. I felt as if I had stepped into the middle of a story still being written. And somehow, I was a character who had been invited to help turn the pages. One afternoon, as I was tending to the tomatoes in the backyard, I heard the faintest sound from the side. Got a creak, then a soft shuffle. I froze, heart racing, unsure whether I should call out or stay silent. To my surprise, it was Mr. Hale, the elderly man who lived 2 houses down. He shuffled over slowly, leaning on his cane eyes. Bright despite the years, he nodded at me, offering a small smile, and said, "I see you've been looking after Lorraine's place. She asked me to keep an eye on things, but I think you've got it handled." We talked briefly about the weather and the state of the neighborhood, but what struck me most was how carefully Mr. Hale avoided mentioning Lorraine directly. It was as if the woman who had left the note was a ghost to most of the street, visible only in whispers and lingering scents of orchids. The next few days were a blend of routine and discovery. I kept watering the plants, tending to the small garden, and occasionally finding new notes or objects tucked in unexpected places. A faded photograph slipped between the pages of one of Lorraine's notebooks showed Amelia at a young age. Smiling broadly with curls bouncing around her face, her eyes sparkling with a mix of mischief and innocence. Nearby, a crumpled receipt from a dance studio hinted at Amelia's early passion for ballet, a detail I had known from the ticket stub. But seeing it in print made it feel more tangible, more real. Lorraine's life unfolded in layers, each revealing a fragment of joy or sorrow, resilience or regret. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, I sat on Lorraine's porch steps, sipping lukewarm tea I'd brought in a thermos. I pulled out my journal and began to write not just about the plants or the house, but about the woman behind the letters. I imagined what Lorraine must have looked like in her youth, a vibrant woman with eyes that held both hope and a quiet sadness, someone who loved fiercely but had learned the hard way that life doesn't always hand you what you deserve. I wrote about Amelia Tootha, girl who had grown up too fast, who had carried her own burdens and disappeared into the world, leaving behind a silence that echoed louder than words. Writing became a way to connect with a story that wasn't mine but had seeped into my veins. As the days grew shorter and the air cooler, I realized I was becoming a part of this story in ways I hadn't anticipated. The simple act of watering plants had transformed into an act of bearing witness, of honoring lives that were both beautiful and broken. I found myself waking earlier, eager to see the changes in the garden, to uncover another note or photograph, to feel the presence of Lorraine and Amelia in the spaces they had once inhabited. It was strange and humbling to think that a neighbor's simple request to water her plants had led me into a world so intimate and profound. One afternoon, I was surprised when Lorraine returned. She came quietly, almost hesitantly, as if unsure of how to re-enter the life she had stepped away from. Her hair was streaked with silver, her eyes tired but warm, and she moved with the slow grace of someone who had learned to carry both sorrow and strength. We stood on the porch, awkwardly at first, but soon enough words found their way between us. She thanked me for caring for her home, for tending to the orchids, and for holding her story gently. Lorraine admitted that she had been afraid to come back, afraid to face the echoes of the past, but that seeing the house alive again, feeling it cared for, had given her hope. Over the following weeks, Lorraine and I grew closer not as friends, but as two people bound by shared understanding. She spoke of Amelia's disappearance, not as a wound, but as a chapter that still held possibilities. She told me about Jack, about the fractures that had pulled their family apart, and about the small joys that had sustained her through the years. The bloom of an orchid, the smile of a neighbor, the promise held in a simple note. I listened, knowing that some stories are too fragile for the world but find refuge in the hearts of those willing to hear. Our conversations were quiet, sometimes interrupted by the chirping of birds or the rustle of leaves, but in the silence, I found a connection that transcended words. With Lorraine's return, the house began to feel like a home again, not just a space of memories, but a place where new ones could be made. We planted new seeds together, watched the garden flourish, and found comfort in the simple rhythms of daily life. And though Amelia was still a question mark, a mystery that hung in the air, Lorraine held on to the hope that one day her daughter might return, that the silence between them might be filled with forgiveness and love. In that hope, I found something. I hadn't expected a quiet peace, a reminder that even broken stories can find moments of grace. The neighborhood around, Lorraine's house began to feel different to me after she returned. It wasn't just the changes inside the garden or the way the orchids seemed to brighten in her presence. It was the subtle shift in the way the community interacted, as if her presence reawakened a part of the street that had been holding its breath. People who once kept their distance started to exchange friendly nods or stop to chat about the weather, the new flowers, or the upcoming town festival. I found myself walking to Loren's place more often, sometimes under the pretense of checking the plants, but really because I wanted to be near the quiet strength she radiated. There was a kind of unspoken companionship growing between us, not built on grand gestures or shared history, but on the fragile, steady foundation of mutual respect and understanding. One afternoon, as I was clearing fallen leaves from the patio, Lorraine invited me inside for tea. The house felt warm and lived in, a place where the weight of years had settled like dust but hadn't buried the light. She showed me a faded photo album tucked away in the corner of the living room, its edges worn from years of handling. As we flipped through the pages together, I saw images of a young Lorraine, radiant and full of life, her smile unguarded and genuine. There were pictures of Amelia to her dancing in tutus, blowing out birthday candles, splashing in a lake. Under the summer sun, photos were a window into a life that felt both distant and achingly close. Lorraine's eyes glistened as she pointed to each picture, sharing snippets of stories that breathed life into the faces frozen in time. The album also revealed glimpses of Jack, Lorraine's estranged husband, who appeared in several pictures. With a tentative smile, arms wrapped awkwardly around Lorraine or a shy Amelia. There was a tenderness in those moments. But it was clear from the faded annotations and the empty spaces in later pages that the family had fractured over time. Lorraine confided that she still carried a mixture of anger and longing toward Jack. Feelings tangled like the vines in her garden, sometimes choking growth but sometimes pulling new shoots upward. Her honesty made the story feel less like a tragic script and more like the messy, complicated reality of love and loss. Days turned into weeks, and our routine settled into a rhythm. I continued watering the plants, trimming dead leaves, and making small repairs around the house. Lorraine would come and go, sometimes lingering to share a meal or a quiet moment on the porch. We didn't speak much about Amelia's whereabouts. Instead, we focused on the present, the fragile healing happening one day at a time. I found solace in the simplicity of caring for the garden and in the quiet presence of someone who had weathered. Storm's Inn was still standing. It was an unspoken understanding between us that the past was a shadow we both acknowledged but didn't chase. One chilly morning, as frost kissed the edges of the leaves and the first light painted the sky in soft pastels, Lorraine handed me a small, wrapped package. Inside was a bundle of letters, carefully tied with a faded blue ribbon. She explained these were letters she had never sent to Amelia, words meant to bridge the silence, to reach across the distance that had grown between them. Maybe one day she read them, Lorraine said softly, and know that I never stopped thinking about her. The gesture felt weighty and tender, a testament to a mother's enduring hope, even when the path ahead was uncertain. As winter deepened, the garden lay dormant under a blanket of snow, but Loren's house felt alive with quiet energy. We spent evenings by the fireplace, sharing stories from our pasts, discovering unexpected commonalities in our lives. She spoke of her childhood in a small town not far from here, of dreams deferred and lessons learned too late. I shared fragments of my own story, the roads I had traveled, the losses that had shaped me. Our conversations weren't about fixing what was broken, but about acknowledging the scars and finding ways to live with them. It was in these moments that I realized the true gift Lorraine had given me, a chance to connect, to witness, and to heal alongside someone who had known pain deeply, but still chose kindness. One afternoon, a knock came at the door. I opened it, to find a young woman standing there, hesitant and uncertain. She introduced herself as Amelia. My heart pounded as I invited her inside, feeling the gravity of this moment, the reunion that had seemed impossible just weeks before. Amelia's eyes held a mixture of apprehension and relief, and as she looked around the house, it was clear she recognized the space despite the years apart. Lorraine appeared from the kitchen, her face a blend of joy and disbelief. The silence that followed was thick with emotion, the weight of years hanging in the air. Slowly, cautiously, they began to bridge the gap with trembling words and tentative smiles. The days that followed were filled with awkwardness and hope. Amelia stayed with Lorraine, and together they navigated the fragile process of rebuilding trust. I watched from the sidelines, grateful to have played a small part in their story, humbled by the resilience of the human heart. Their journey wasn't perfect. There were tears, raised voices, moments of retreat, but beneath it all was a shared desire to heal and to find a way forward. Watching them, I thought about the power of simple acts, the watering of plants, the writing of letters, the opening of a door that can change lives in ways you never anticipate. The return of Amelia to Lorraine's home brought a new kind of energy, fragile but undeniable, as though the house itself was holding its breath in anticipation of something long overdue. The walls that had once echoed only silence now hummed with the low murmur of tentative conversations and the soft shuffle of footsteps rediscovering familiar places. I found myself drawn into this delicate dance, feeling the weight of history, pressing down yet somehow buoyed by the fragile hope that fluttered beneath the surface. Each day was an exercise in patience and empathy, watching two lives attempt to reweave a bond frayed by years of absence and unanswered questions. Lorraine moved cautiously around Amelia, her gestures careful and measured, as if afraid that, too, much eagerness might shatter the fragile progress they had made. Amelia, in turn, was guarded but gradually softened, revealing glimpses of the vibrant girl she once was beneath the protective shell she had built. The house was filled with moments of quiet grace, shared meals where laughter bubbled up unexpectedly. A glance exchanged across a room, a gentle touch on a hand that spoke volumes. It was far from perfect, but it was real. And in that reality, I found a kind of beauty I hadn't anticipated. A testament to the resilience of love and the human capacity to forgive. As winter thawed into spring, the garden began to awaken once more, buds pushing through the soil, leaves unfurling with shy determination. Lorraine and Amelia worked side by side, tending to the flowers, planting new seeds, and restoring the garden to its former glory. The garden became a metaphor for their relationship once neglected, fragile, but with the potential to bloom anew. I watched them from the sidelines, feeling honored to witness this slow transformation. The orchids Lorraine had cared for so meticulously now seemed to glow with renewed life, their delicate petals mirroring the tentative hope in their caretaker's eyes. One afternoon, the sunlight filtered through the lace curtains. Lorraine pulled out the bundle of unsent letters she had given me weeks before. Together, they read the words aloud, sharing in the emotions woven into each line. Tears fell quietly, mingling with smiles and whispered promises. It was a moment of reckoning and release, a recognition that while the past couldn't be undone, it could be acknowledged and embraced as part of their shared story. The letters became a bridge, spanning the gap between absence and presence, loss and reunion. Throughout these days, I found myself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought me here, from a simple favor to water some plants to becoming a silent witness to a family's healing. The experience had changed me in ways I hadn't expected. I had learned that sometimes the smallest acts carry the greatest weight, that the most profound connections arise from moments of vulnerability and trust. Lorraine and Amelia's story was a reminder that life's complexities can't always be neatly packaged or resolved, but that within the messiness lies a chance for grace. One evening, as dusk settled over the neighborhood and the first stars appeared, Lorraine and Amelia invited me to sit with them on the porch. We shared a quiet meal beneath the fading light, the air filled with the scent of blooming jasmine and the distant call of night birds. Conversation flowed easily, punctuated by comfortable silences that spoke of newfound understanding. Lorraine spoke of her dreams for the future, not grand or extravagant, but simple and sincere. A garden that flourished, a home filled with laughter, and the hope of rebuilding what had been lost. Amelia listened, her eyes bright with the cautious optimism of someone ready to try again. In those moments, I felt the weight of my own loneliness lift, replaced by a sense of belonging I hadn't known I was seeking. The lines between neighbor and friend blurred, and I realized that sometimes the people who enter our lives unexpectedly leave the deepest marks. Lorraine and Amelia's story had become a part of me, living testament to the power of connection and the courage it takes to face the unknown. It was a story not just of loss, but of hope, resilience, and the quiet strength found in simply showing up for one another. As the evening wore on, I stood to leave, the night air cool against my skin. Lorraine and Amelia waved from the porch, their figures softened by the glow of the porch light. Walking back to my car, I looked up at the sky. Now a tapestry of stars stretched wide and endless. The journey that had begun with a simple request to water some plants had unfolded into something far greater, a reminder that sometimes the most profound stories are written not in grand gestures, but in the quiet acts of care and presence. And in those acts, we find the seeds of healing, waiting patiently to bloom. Spring had settled fully into the neighborhood by the time Lorraine and Amelia's tentative reunion had begun to take root in something steadier. The garden flourished, new blossoms opening daily, their colors bright and defiant against the lingering chill in the mornings. I found myself visiting more frequently, not out of duty, but because the place had become a refuge, a sanctuary from the noise and demands of my own life. There was a peacefulness in the rhythm of watering the plants, trimming the roses and watching seedlings unfurl that I hadn't experienced in years. It was as though the garden mirrored the healing that was quietly unfolding inside the house. Each leaf and petal a small victory against time's slow erosion. Lorraine and Amelia's conversations grew longer, their silences less weighted with apprehension. They shared stories of their lives during the years apart Amelia's travels. The mistakes she'd made, the lessons she'd learned, Lorraine's own struggles, the emptiness left by absence, and the resilience born from carrying on. I listened, sometimes from a distance, feeling like an observer of something sacred. Their voices blended with the chirping of birds and the rustle of leaves, creating a soundtrack that was both hopeful and bittersweet. I realized then how powerful the act of returning can be, how it takes courage to face what was lost and the determination to try again. One afternoon, while watering the hydrangeas, I noticed Amelia kneeling by a patch of earth where new bulbs had been planted. She was carefully clearing away weeds, her fingers gentle but purposeful. Lorraine joined her, and together they worked in silence, punctuated by soft laughter and the occasional shared glance. It was a quiet communion, a wordless reaffirmation that healing isn't always spoken but felt in moments like these. Watching them, I understood that reconciliation was not a destination, but a journey, a winding path marked by patience, forgiveness, and hope. As the weeks passed, Lorraine confided in me about her fears and hopes. She spoke of the guilt that lingered like a shadow, the what-ifs that haunted her in the quiet hours of the night. "What if I had done things differently?" she asked one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. I told her that love is rarely perfect, and that sometimes the only thing we can do is show up and keep trying. That sometimes the smallest gestures, watering plants, writing a letter, opening a door, can create ripples we never see. She smiled then, a real smile, the kind that reaches the eyes, and it felt like a breakthrough. Amelia, too, began to open up more, sharing memories of her childhood, her dreams, and the struggles that had led her away from home. She talked about feeling lost, about the loneliness that had filled the years of absence. But she also spoke of the relief in coming back, of the comfort found in familiar walls, and the hope sparked by a mother's unwavering love. I was struck by her honesty, her bravery in facing a past that wasn't always kind. It made me reflect on my own life and the relationships I had let drift away, chances I hadn't taken. With spring turning to summer, the garden became a vibrant symbol of renewal. Lorraine and Amelia planted sunflowers that seemed to reach for the sky, tulips bursting with color, and herbs that filled the air with fragrant promise. The house was alive again, filled with light and laughter. And the silence that once weighed so heavily had been replaced by a soundtrack of hope. I felt privileged to be part of this chapter, humbled by the grace and strength that both women embodied. One evening, As we sat around the kitchen table sharing stories and planning for the coming months, Lorraine reached into a drawer and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside were keepsakes from years past, a locket with a faded photograph, a bracelet Amelia had given her, and a stack of postcards they had sent each other during Amelia's absence. The items spoke of a connection that had never fully broken, a thread of love woven through distance and silence. Lorraine held the box close, and I could see the depth of emotion in her eyes, a mixture of sorrow, hope, and determination. Our conversations sometimes wandered into the future, to dreams of what might be rather than what had been. Lorraine talked about hosting small gatherings in the garden, about teaching Amelia the art of orchid care, and about finding peace in the rhythms of everyday life. Amelia dreamed aloud of traveling again, but with the intention of returning home, of rebuilding the life she had left behind. The garden, once a silent witness to absence, had become a beacon of possibility, a testament to the healing power of time and love. In quiet moments, I would find myself reflecting on how a simple request to water some plants had blossomed into something far more profound. It had drawn me into a story of loss and reunion, of courage and forgiveness. It had reminded me that sometimes the smallest acts carry the deepest meanings, that connection often grows in unexpected places. And it had shown me the resilience of the human spirit, the way hope can take root even in the most unlikely soils. As summer settled in, I knew that the story was far from over. There were still wounds to heal, questions unanswered, and paths to walk. But there was also growth both in the garden and in the hearts of those who tended it. Lorraine and Amelia's journey was a living testament to the power of showing up, of caring, and of believing that even when everything seems lost, there is still a chance for renewal. As summer's warmth deepened, the small town around Lorraine's house buzzed with a quiet energy that mirrored the changes unfolding within those garden walls. The street, once a collection of strangers living parallel lives, now felt more like a community weaving itself back together thread by thread. Neighbors who barely exchanged greetings began to stop and chat over fences or during morning walks, the garden's blooming flowers acting like a beacon drawing people closer. Lorraine and Amelia's renewed presence seemed to breathe new life into the neighborhood, their story quietly inspiring those around them in ways no one could have predicted. I often found myself reflecting on how something as simple as watering plants could ripple outwards, touching lives far beyond the immediate. The relationship between Lorraine and Amelia continued to evolve with all the complexities that come from years apart. There were moments of laughter, deep conversations, and shared memories that brought them closer. But there were also times when the weight of the past pressed heavily, leading to silence or even tension.
8.
Each challenge seemed to strengthen their bond in its own way, like roots growing deeper beneath the surface. Watching them navigate these ups and downs was a lesson in patience and grace. I learned that healing isn't a straight line, but a winding path with unexpected turns that test our resolve and commitment to one another. One day, as I was tending to the garden, I noticed a small group of children playing nearby. Their laughter was infectious, a bright contrast to the seriousness that often accompanied adult conversations. Among them was a young girl with wide eyes and curly hair who reminded me of Amelia in her youth. Lorraine smiled as she watched them, her expression softening with a mix of nostalgia and hope. She told me stories about Amelia's childhood, the mischief she got into, and the dreams she carried. It struck me how the garden not only nurtured plants, but also became a space for stories, memories, and the passing down of hope to the next generation. That afternoon, Lorraine and I sat on the porch discussing what the future might hold. Shared her desire to turn the garden into a community space, a place where neighbors could gather, children could learn about nature, and the stories of the past could live on in new ways. It was an ambitious dream, but one that felt fitting for someone who had found renewal through connection and care. I offered to help, both because I believed in the vision and because being part of this journey had become important to me. We began planning small improvements, planting benches, setting up flower beds, and organizing weekend workshops. The project gave us a shared purpose: something tangible to work towards beyond the walls of the house. As the weeks unfolded, noticed how the garden transformed not just physically, but emotionally. It became a sanctuary where Lorraine could find peace, where Amelia could reconnect with her roots, and where neighbors could rediscover each other. The sunflowers stretched tall, their faces following the light while herbs and flowers filled the air with scents that seemed to hold stories of love and loss. The garden was no longer just a patch of earth. It was a living symbol of resilience and hope. I often found myself lingering there long after the work was done, soaking in the quiet joy of a place reborn. One evening, as twilight settled over the neighborhood, Lorraine invited me inside for dinner. The house was warm and inviting, filled with the soft glow of lamps and the scent of homemade bread. We talked late into the night, sharing stories from our pasts and dreams for the future. Lorraine spoke candidly about the pain of losing Amelia, the guilt she carried, and the unexpected gift of having her daughter back. I shared parts of my own story to the struggles I'd faced, the losses I'd endured, and the hope I still held on to. It was a moment of vulnerability and connection that deepened the bond between us, reminding me that healing often comes through shared stories and honest hearts. As the months passed, Amelia became more involved in the community garden project, teaching children about plants and helping organize neighborhood events. Her presence was a reminder that even when life pulls us away, the threads of family and home can be rewoven with care and intention. Lorraine watched her daughter with pride and a touch of awe, grateful for the chance to rebuild what had once seemed lost. Their relationship was far from perfect, but it was growing stronger with each day, nurtured by patience, forgiveness, and the shared love for the garden that had brought them back together. Reflecting on the journey, I realized how much I had grown alongside Lorraine and Amelia. What began as a simple favor to water plants had evolved into a profound lesson about the power of connection, the resilience of the human spirit, and the importance of showing up even when the outcome is uncertain. I was reminded that sometimes the smallest acts carry the greatest meaning, and that the stories we become part of can change us in ways we never expect. Lorraine and Amelia's story was a testament to the enduring power of love, hope, and the courage to start anew. The arrival of summer brought with it a wave of activity that swept through the neighborhood like a gentle tide, carrying with it new hopes and quiet transformations. The Community Garden Project, once a modest idea born from Lorraine's desire to heal and connect, had blossomed into a vibrant space that drew neighbors of all ages together. On weekends, children's laughter filled the air as they learned to plant seeds and care for flowers under Amelia's patient guidance. Adults gathered to share stories, exchange gardening tips, and simply enjoy the warmth of shared company. It was as if the garden had become a living testament to the power of renewal, not just in plants, but in people and relationships. Lorraine and Amelia's bond continued to deepen, shaped by the daily rituals of tending to the garden and navigating the complex emotions of reconciliation. There were moments of joy like when Amelia's sunflowers finally bloomed, standing tall and proud against the summer sky, and moments of struggle, when old wounds surfaced and threatened to unravel the progress they had made. But through it all, they remained committed to each other, finding strength in their shared history and the promise of a future they were slowly building together. Their journey was far from linear, marked by setbacks and breakthroughs, but grounded in a mutual willingness to forgive and grow. One afternoon, I found myself sitting on a bench near the rose bushes, watching Lorraine and Amelia plant a new row of lavender. The sun cast long shadows across the garden, and the air was thick with the scent of earth and blooming flowers. Lorraine's hands moved with a practiced grace, carefully placing each plant in the soil, while Amelia offered quiet encouragement. It was a scene that spoke of healing, patience, and the unspoken bond that had formed between mother and daughter. I felt privileged to witness such a tender moment, one that captured the essence of their story, a story of love, rediscovered and nurtured like the very plants they tended as the summer days stretched on. The garden became a backdrop for new memories and quiet celebrations. Lorraine hosted small gatherings, inviting neighbors to share meals and stories beneath the canopy of stars. Amelia organized workshops for local children, teaching them about the importance of nature and the joys of cultivating life. These moments of community and connection were a balm for wounds both old and new, a reminder that healing often comes through shared experiences and acts of kindness. I often thought back to the note Lorraine had left me months ago, the one that changed everything, and marveled at how a simple request had unfolded into something so much greater. Lorraine confided in me one evening about her hopes for the Bend future, her voice filled with a mix of cautious optimism and determination. She dreamed of expanding the garden, of creating a sanctuary, not just for plants, but for people seeking solace and connection. She spoke of building a small greenhouse, hosting educational programs, and fostering a space where stories like hers and Amelia's could inspire others to find healing in unexpected places. Her vision was ambitious, yet grounded in the realities of her own journey marked by resilience, love, and the quiet courage to start again. Amelia, too, shared her dreams during one of our conversations. She spoke of wanting to study environmental science, driven by her experiences in the garden and a desire to protect the natural world that had given her so much comfort. She expressed gratitude for the chance to reconnect with her mother and the community, and a newfound sense of purpose that filled the spaces left empty by years of absence. Listening to her, I was struck by the transformative power of second chances, the way hope can take root even in the most unlikely circumstances, and how love, when nurtured, can heal even the deepest wounds. As the seasons began to shift toward autumn, the garden transformed once again. Leaves turned golden and crimson, petals softened and fell, and the air grew crisp with the promise of change. Lorraine and Amelia continued their work, embracing the cyclical nature of growth and decay as a metaphor for their own lives. Faced challenges, questions about the past, the uncertainty of the future, and the complexities of rebuilding trust, but they did so together. Anchored by the shared experiences that had brought them this far, their story was one of patience and perseverance, a reminder that healing is an ongoing process, not a destination. One chilly evening, as the first frost settled on the garden, Lorraine handed me a small envelope. Inside was another note, one addressed not to me, but to Amelia. It was a letter filled with love, apologies, and hopes for the future, a tangible symbol of the emotional journey they had undertaken. Lorraine asked me to deliver it personally, trusting me with a piece of their story. As I read the words, I felt the depth of her emotion, the vulnerability, the strength, and the unwavering love that had sustained her through years of hardship. It was a moment that crystallized the essence of their journey, the power of words, actions, and presence to change lives. Reflecting on the months since I first agreed to water Lorraine's plants, I was struck by how much had changed, not just in their lives, but in my own. The simple act of helping a neighbor had led me into a story of loss, hope, and renewal. It had reminded me that life's most profound moments often come from unexpected places, and that the bonds we forge through kindness and care can transform us in ways we never imagined. Lorraine and Amelia's journey was far from over. It was already a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of love. As autumn deepened its hold, the neighborhood transformed into a tapestry of warm hues crimson. Leaves drifted lazily to the ground. The crisp air carried the faint scent of wood smoke and earth preparing for winter's rest. The garden that had once been a symbol of renewal now stood as a testament to endurance. Each plant weathering the changing seasons, much like Lorraine and Amelia had weathered the storms of their past. The daily rituals of tending to the plants continued, though now with an added layer of meaning. Every watering, every pruning felt like an act of preservation, not just of flora, but of hope and connection. Lorraine's small house had become a gathering place for the neighborhood. It was no longer just a home, but a sanctuary where stories were shared and bonds were forged. On weekends, the porch filled with laughter and conversation as neighbors came together, drawn by the warmth of community and the garden's quiet beauty. Amelia's role grew beyond caretaker and daughter. She became a teacher and mentor, guiding children through the rhythms of nature and the lessons embedded within it. Watching her, I marveled at how far she had come from a young woman haunted by absence to someone full of purpose and promise. One chilly afternoon, as frost began to lace the edges of leaves, Lorraine and Amelia invited me inside for tea. House was cozy, filled with the aroma of fresh herbs and baked goods. We sat by the fireplace, its soft glow casting flickering shadows on the walls, and talked about the journey they had taken together. Lorraine spoke of the guilt and pain that had once consumed her, but now seemed tempered by forgiveness and understanding. Amelia shared her fears about the future, the lingering doubts that sometimes crept in despite the progress they had made. Our conversation was raw and honest, a reminder that healing is not linear, but a winding path marked by vulnerability and resilience. The letter. Lorraine had asked me to deliver weighed heavily on my mind. I had read it several times, feeling the intensity of her emotions with each word. It was more than an apology. It was a plea for connection and a promise to be present. When the moment came to give it to Amelia, I approached with a mix of reverence and hope. She received the letter quietly, her fingers trembling slightly as she unfolded the paper. As she read, I saw tears well in her eyes, tears not just of sorrow, but of release. The letter became a bridge, closing a gap that years of silence had widened, and opening the door to new possibilities. The days grew shorter and the garden prepared for its winter slumber. Lorraine and Amelia worked side by side, clearing fallen leaves and protecting delicate plants from the cold. Their movements were synchronized, a dance perfected over months of shared labor and quiet understanding. I often joined them, feeling a part of something larger than myself, community bound by care, and the shared desire to nurture life in all its forms. The garden, like their relationship, was not perfect, but it was alive, growing, resilient. One evening, as we watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky with strokes of pink and gold, Lorraine spoke of the power of forgiveness. She told us that forgiving herself had been the hardest part, that she had carried the weight of regret for so long it had become a part of her identity. But in letting go, she found freedom, freedom that allowed her to be fully present with Amelia and with the life they were rebuilding together. Her words lingered in the cool air, a reminder that healing begins within, and that only when we forgive ourselves can we truly open our hearts to others. Amelia nodded, her gaze steady and thoughtful. She shared her own journey toward forgiveness, just of Lorraine, but of herself. The years away had left scars, but they had also taught her strength and compassion. She spoke of learning to accept the past without letting it define her future, and of the courage it took to return home and face the uncertainties that came with it.
Ow.
Her voice was quiet but resolute, carrying the weight of experience and the lightness of hope. In that moment, the bond between mother and daughter felt unbreakable, forged through shared pain and the promise of new beginnings. As the first snowflakes began to fall, blanketing the neighborhood in white, the garden entered its quietest season. Beneath the frost and ice, life pulsed softly, waiting for the warmth of spring to awaken it once more. Lorraine and Amelia continued their work inside, planning for the future and nurturing the seeds of hope they had planted. Their story, like the garden, was a cycle of seasons, marked by growth, rest, and renewal. It was a reminder that even in the coldest times beneath the surface, life endures. Reflecting on my time with Lorraine and Amelia, I understood that their story was more than just about plants or family. It was about the human capacity to heal, to connect, and to find meaning in unexpected places. The simple request to water some plants had led me into a world of courage and grace, teaching me that every act of kindness has the power to change lives. Their journey was far from over, but it was already a testament to the strength of love and the resilience of the human spirit. Winter had settled fully over the neighborhood. By the time I found myself reflecting on the transformation that had taken place over the past months, the world outside was quiet beneath a thick blanket of snow, but inside Lorraine's home, life hummed with a warmth that defied the chill. The garden, resting beneath the frost, held the promise of renewal, just beneath the surfacer, promise mirrored in the evolving relationship between Lorraine and Amelia. Their journey had been marked by moments of doubt and hope, of pain and forgiveness, and now, as the year drew to a close, they stood at a place of fragile peace and new understanding. Lorraine's resilience amazed me. She had faced the ghosts of her past with a courage that was quiet but unwavering, choosing to confront instead of retreat. Each day, she tended to the house and prepared for the spring with a determination that spoke of hope more than obligation. Amelia, too, had grown into her role not only as a daughter, but as a vital part of the community they were building. Brought energy and light, reminding those around her that even after the darkest winters, life could flourish again. Together, they were rebuilding something neither had dared to dream. Possible, a family reconnected, a home restored. The small gatherings at Lorraine's house continued through the winter months. The fire crackling as neighbors shared food, stories, and laughter. The garden, although dormant, remained a focal point in conversations, a symbol of the ongoing cycle of life and healing. Amelia often spoke about the lessons she learned from the soil, about patience and the need to nurture even when progress seemed invisible. It was a philosophy that extended beyond the garden, touching every part of her life and those around her. Watching her, I realized how much the simple act of watering plants had blossomed into a movement of hope that was far-reaching. One particularly cold evening, Lorraine invited me to help prepare the house for the holiday season. As we hung decorations and baked bread, she spoke softly about the significance of family traditions and the importance of creating new memories while honoring the past. Her voice carried a depth of emotion that revealed how much this journey had changed her, not just as a mother, but as a woman reclaiming her strength. Amelia joined us later, her smile radiant despite the lingering shadows of old wounds. Together, the three of us shared a quiet meal, a moment of connection that felt both ordinary and extraordinary. Lorraine confided in me about the note. She had left when she first asked me to water her plants. She hadn't expected it to lead to so much yet. Rekindled relationship with her daughter, a community coming together, and a newfound sense of purpose. She said it was a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts carry the greatest power, and that reaching out, even in simple ways, can change the course of a life. I nodded, thinking back to the days when I first received that note, unaware that it would lead me on this unexpected journey. It was a lesson in kindness, patience, and the unpredictable nature of human connection. Amelia shared her own reflections with me one afternoon as we worked in the kitchen. She spoke about the pain of separation and the challenges of returning home, but also about the joy of rediscovery. She described the garden as a living metaphor for her life, sometimes wild and tangled, sometimes carefully tended, but always growing toward the light. Her words resonated deeply, reminding me that healing is a process that requires both strength and vulnerability. It was a reminder that no matter how far we stray, the roots of love can always bring us back. As winter gave way to the first hints of spring, the garden began to stir beneath the thawing earth. Lorraine and Amelia worked side by side to prepare the soil, plant bulbs, and plan for the coming season. Their collaboration was a symbol of the progress they had made, a tangible expression of hope and renewal. The neighborhood, too, seemed to awaken from its winter slumber, with neighbors eager to join in the efforts and share in the promise of new growth. The garden had become more than just a project. It was a catalyst for community, healing, and connection. Reflecting on the months since that first note was left on my doorstep, I was reminded of the unexpected ways life unfolds. A simple request to water some plants had led me into a story of love, loss, and reconciliation that touched not only Lorraine and Amelia, but everyone around them. It had taught me about the power of kindness, the resilience of the human spirit, and the importance of showing up even when the outcome is uncertain. Their journey was a testament to the fact that healing often begins with small acts of care and the willingness to take a chance on connection. As I looked out over the garden, now dotted with the first brave blooms of spring, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the chance to witness this story, to be a part of its unfolding, and to be reminded that even in the darkest moments, there is always hope. Lorraine and Amelia's story was far from over, but it was already a beacon of light shining through the seasons, guiding us all toward renewal. Spring's gentle arrival breathed fresh life into the neighborhood, and with it came a sense of possibility that seemed to seep from the earth itself. But the garden, once dormant under winter's grip, began to burst forth with vibrant colors and delicate fragrances that filled the air and lifted spirits. Lorraine and Amelia, working side by side, embodied this transformation in the way they tended to the soil and to each other. Each seed planted felt like a promise of healing, of growth, and of the future they were forging together. The garden had become more than a space of plants. It was a living symbol of resilience and rebirth. Neighbors continued to be drawn into the project, their curiosity and goodwill, helping the garden flourish beyond Lorraine and Amelia's immediate circle. Volunteers came with shovels and smiles, sharing stories, laughter, and an eagerness to contribute. The garden became a hub of connection, a place where barriers between strangers dissolved under the common goal of nurturing life. I often marveled at how a simple request to water some plants had blossomed into something so profound a movement that not only revived a patch of earth, but also rekindled a community's sense of belonging. Lorraine's growth throughout this journey was especially striking. Once weighed down by guilt and regret, she now moved with a quiet confidence that radiated from within. She had learned to accept the past without being defined by it, finding peace in the present and hope for what lay ahead. Amelia's return had brought challenges, but it also sparked healing that neither could have achieved alone. Their relationship, while still a work in progress, was rooted in a newfound respect and understanding. Watching them interact sometimes with laughter, sometimes with tears, but always with honesty, reminded me that reconciliation is a journey, not a destination. One afternoon, as I helped Amelia plant a new bed of wildflowers, she shared with me her dreams for the future. She talked about wanting to pursue studies in environmental science, inspired by her experiences in the garden and a desire to protect the natural world. Her passion was contagious, and I could see how much the garden had nurtured not only plants, but also her spirit. Amelia spoke about wanting to give back to the community that had embraced her and her mother, and to help others find healing through nature as she had. It was a reminder of the ripple effects that kindness and care can have, touching lives in unexpected and beautiful ways. Lorraine, too, opened up about her hopes and fears. She confessed that while the garden had been a source of healing, it also forced her to confront emotions she had long buried. There were moments when the weight of the past threatened to overwhelm her, when she questioned whether she was strong enough to keep moving forward. But in those moments, the garden and Amelia were anchors, reminders that growth often comes from struggle. Lorraine's resilience was a testament to the human capacity for renewal, and her story inspired everyone who heard it. As the weeks passed, the garden continued to flourish under the care of Lorraine, Amelia, and the community. The once neglected patch of earth had become a sanctuary, a place where people gathered to find peace, to connect, and to heal. The air was thick with the scent of blooming flowers and fresh earth, but more importantly, it was filled with the intangible energy of hope and renewal. The garden was a reminder that even in the face of hardship and loss, life could find a way to bloom again. Reflecting on my part in this journey, I realized how deeply I had been changed by the experience. What began as a simple favor to water a neighbor's plant had led me into a story of love, forgiveness, and transformation that resonated far beyond the boundaries of that small garden. It taught me that sometimes the most profound changes come from the smallest acts of kindness, and that healing often begins with showing up, even when the outcome is uncertain. Lorraine and Amelia's story was a living testament to these truths, a beacon shining brightly through the seasons. The garden had become a legacy, not just of plants, but of people, of a mother and daughter who dared to rebuild their bond, of a community that came together to nurture life, and of the quiet power of compassion to change the course of lives. As I looked out over the vibrant blooms and bustling activity, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the opportunity to witness this transformation, to be part of a story that reminded us all of the enduring strength of love and the promise of new beginnings. As spring turned toward summer, the garden had fully awakened. bursting with a riot of colors and fragrances that seemed to breathe life into every corner of the neighborhood. The flowers swayed gently in the warm breeze, and bees hummed busily from blossom to blossom. The space that had once been a quiet patch of struggling plants had transformed into a vibrant community hub, a living testament to patience, care, and the magic of second chances. Lorraine and Amelia had become pillars of this transformation, their dedication evident in every blooming rose and every weed pulled with loving hands. Watching them, it was clear that the garden was not only healing the earth, but healing them as well. Lorraine's demeanor had shifted remarkably over the past months. The burden of years of guilt and regret had begun to lift, replaced by a calm, a sense of purpose and joy. She moved through her days with a gentleness and grace that reflected her inner growth, finding strength in the small victories, the first buds of spring, a neighbor's smile, the warmth of Amelia's hand in hers, the long, painful silence that had once defined her relationship with her daughter was now filled with conversations, shared laughter, and quiet moments of understanding. Their bond, while still fragile and sometimes tentative, was rooted in the shared soil of forgiveness and hope. Amelia, for her part, had blossomed into a young woman filled with passion and determination. The garden had become her sanctuary, a place where she could reconnect with herself and the world around her. She spoke often about her dreams studying environmental science, advocating for conservation, and helping others find peace through nature's healing power. Her enthusiasm was infectious, inspiring neighbors young and old to see the garden not just as a project, but as a symbol of community, resilience, and renewal. Amelia's presence was a reminder that even the deepest wounds could be softened with time, love, and care. The neighborhood had rallied around Lorraine and Amelia's efforts, coming together in ways that surprised even them. Regular gardening days were filled with laughter, hard work, and shared stories. Children learned to plant seeds and watch them grow, while adults found solace in the camaraderie and sense of purpose the garden provided. The space had become a meeting ground for friendship, healing, and hope, a place where the scars of the past could be softened by the nurturing touch of community. I often marveled at how a simple note left on a doorstep months ago sparked a chain of events that rippled far beyond anyone's expectations. One afternoon, as I helped Amelia transplant a cluster of delicate daisies, she confided in me about her relationship with Lorraine. She spoke candidly about the challenges they still face, the shadows of old hurts, moments of doubt, and the lingering pain of years apart. Yet, she also spoke with warmth and gratitude, emphasizing the strides they had made toward rebuilding trust and understanding. The garden, she said, was their shared sanctuary, a place where words weren't always necessary because the earth itself bore witness to their journey. Amelia's honesty was a powerful reminder that healing is ongoing and requires both patience and courage. Lorraine shared similar sentiments during one of our quiet evenings by the fire. She admitted that while the path forward was uncertain, she felt a renewed sense of hope and determination. The garden had given her something she hadn't had in years, a reason to look forward, to believe in the possibility of joy and connection. She spoke of plans to expand the garden, to involve more members of the community, and to create a space that welcomed everyone seeking solace or friendship. Lorraine's vision was rooted not just in plants but in people, in the transformative power of coming together to nurture life in all its forms. As the summer sun warmed the earth, the garden flourished, becoming a vibrant mosaic of colors, scents, and textures. Lorraine and Amelia continued their work with unwavering dedication, their shared efforts a symbol of the healing they both sought. The neighborhood, too, thrived alongside them, bound by a renewed sense of community and purpose. The story that had begun with a simple request to water some plants had grown into a living testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of kindness to change lives. Looking back on the months since that first note arrived, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey I had witnessed. The story of Lorraine and Amelia was a powerful reminder that even the smallest gestures could lead to profound change, that healing often begins with reaching out, and that love in all its forms is worth fighting for. Their story was far from over, but it had already left an indelible mark on everyone involved, the beacon of hope shining brightly through the seasons. Summer was in full bloom, and the garden had become a sanctuary of life and color that seemed to pulse with the energy of every soul who had touched it. The mornings were filled with the hum of bees and the gentle rustling of leaves, while evenings brought the soft glow of fireflies dancing in the warm air. Lorraine and Amelia moved through the garden with a quiet rhythm, their hands tending the soil with care and familiarity born of countless hours of shared effort. Their relationship, like the plants they nurtured, had deepened and strengthened, rooted in trust, forgiveness, and a mutual commitment to growth. The neighborhood's involvement grew steadily, transforming the garden from a personal refuge into a communal space where people found connection and healing. Neighbors who had once barely exchanged greetings now gathered regularly, drawn by the garden's warmth and the sense of belonging it fostered. Children learned about the cycles of nature and the importance of nurturing life, while adults found solace in the shared labor and quiet companionship. It was as though the garden had become a living metaphor for the community itself, place where past hurts could be tended and new roots could take hold. Lorraine often reflected on how much her life had changed since the note was left on her doorstep. The simple act of asking for help had set off a chain of events that had reshaped her world. She had discovered strength in vulnerability and learned to embrace imperfection as part of the healing process. The guilt that once weighed heavily on her shoulders had loosened its grip, replaced by a growing sense of peace and acceptance. Amelia's return had been both a challenge and a blessing, forcing her to confront old wounds while offering a chance to rebuild their relationship on new terms. Amelia, too, had grown in ways she hadn't anticipated. The garden had given her a sense of purpose and belonging that had been missing for years. She spoke often about the healing power of nature, the way it teaches patience, resilience, and hope. The time spent tending plants and working alongside her mother had opened doors to understanding and forgiveness. Though the road ahead was uncertain and sometimes difficult, Amelia felt ready to face it with an open heart and a spirit strengthened by the trials she had endured. The garden was her sanctuary, a place where she could grow both literally and figuratively. One day, during a community garden event, I found myself reflecting on the unlikely journey that had brought us all here. What had started as a simple request to water plants had blossomed into a story of reconciliation, community, and hope. The garden had become a symbol of what is possible when people come together with kindness and intention. It was a reminder that even the smallest gestures can ripple outward, touching lives in ways we can never fully anticipate. This garden, and the story behind it, was a living testament to the power of human connection. Lorraine shared with me her hopes for the future, envisioning the garden as a place of learning and healing for generations to come. She dreamed of workshops for children, spaces for meditation and reflection, and ongoing community events that would bring people together. Her vision was grounded in the belief that nature has the power to restore not just the earth, but also the human spirit. Amelia's enthusiasm matched her mother's, and together they imagined a garden that would continue to grow and evolve, much like their relationship. Their dreams were a powerful affirmation of the journey they had taken from pain and separation to hope and renewal as the days stretched longer and warmer. The garden thrived under the combined care of Lorraine, Amelia, and the community. The vibrant colors and fragrant blossoms drew visitors and neighbors alike, all eager to experience the peace and beauty that had grown from a simple act of kindness. Lorraine and Amelia's bond continued to deepen, their shared efforts nurturing not only the plants, but also the fragile threads of trust and understanding between them. The garden was a living reminder that healing takes time and patience, but that it is always possible. Reflecting on this journey, I was filled with gratitude for the chance to witness such transformation firsthand. What began as watering some plants had become so much more a story of love, forgiveness, and the enduring power of connection. Lorraine and Amelia's experience showed me that no matter how difficult the past, there is always a path forward, paved by hope and the willingness to care. Their story was far from finished, but it had already left a lasting impact. A beacon of light shining through the seasons, As the summer days lingered longer, the garden became a sanctuary, not just for plants, but for stories and memories that intertwined with the blooms and leaves. The once quiet neighborhood was now alive with laughter, conversations, and the soft murmur of people gathered to share in the simple joy of being together. Lorraine and Amelia had grown inseparable in their work and in their healing, their bond, reflecting the seasons that shaped the garden, sometimes stormy and uncertain, but always with the promise of sunshine and growth ahead. It was a journey that had taken unexpected turns, but had led them to a place of fragile peace and hope. The garden had also become a place of learning and reflection. Children from the neighborhood came to help plant and care for the flowers, their small hands digging into the earth with curiosity and wonder.
Oh.
They asked questions about the plants, about the seasons, and about the story behind the gardens. Revival. Lorraine and Amelia took every opportunity to share not just gardening tips, but lessons about patience, forgiveness, and the power of kindness. These moments of teaching were as much a part of the garden's growth as the blooms themselves, nurturing the next generation with seeds of empathy and resilience. I often found myself drawn back to the quiet moments in the garden, where the noise of daily life seemed to fade away, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves and the sweet scent of blossoms. It was in these moments that the true magic of the garden revealed itself, a place where the past could be set aside, healing could take root. Lorraine confided that tending the garden had become her therapy, a way to process years of pain and regret while nurturing something beautiful and alive. Amelia agreed, saying the garden gave her a chance to reconnect with her mother and with herself in ways she never thought possible. As the community's involvement grew, the garden also became a place of celebration. Seasonal festivals brought neighbors together, transforming the space into a vibrant gathering spot filled with music, food, and laughter. Lorraine and Amelia's vision of the garden as a hub of connection and healing was coming to life in ways that surpassed their expectations. These celebrations were more than just social events. They were affirmations of resilience and renewal, reminders that even after hardship, joy could be found and shared. The garden was no longer just a project hit, was a living legacy. Amid all this growth and joy, Lorraine and Amelia still faced moments of uncertainty and challenge. The scars of the past didn't disappear overnight, and there were days when the weight of old wounds threatened to overshadow their progress. But through these struggles, they found strength in each other and in the community that had rallied around them. The garden was a constant reminder that healing is not linear, but a process of ups and downs, growth and setbacks. It was a lesson they embraced with grace and determination. Knowing that the journey itself was as important as the destination, the late summer sun cast long shadows over the garden as Lorraine and Amelia prepared for the next phase of their journey. Plans were underway to expand the garden, to include spaces for meditation, art installations, and educational workshops. The vision they shared was rooted not just in plants but in people, a place where anyone seeking solace or connection could find a home. Their dream was a testament to the transformative power of love, community, and perseverance. The garden, born from a simple note left on a doorstep, had grown into a beacon of hope and renewal for all who crossed its path. Reflecting on the journey that had brought us here, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the opportunity to witness such a remarkable transformation. The story of Lorraine and Amelia was a reminder that healing often begins with small, simple acts of kindness, and that the bonds we forge through compassion can change lives in ways we never imagined. Their garden was not just a place of beauty, but a symbol of resilience, a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit. It was a story that would continue to unfold, carrying with it the promise of new beginnings and lasting connections. The air had softened as autumn crept in, painting the neighborhood in shades of amber, crimson, and gold. The garden, having thrived through spring and summer, was preparing for its seasonal rest, its vibrant blooms giving way to quiet branches and fallen leaves. Yet beneath the surface, life pulsed steadily, a reminder that endings were also beginnings in disguise. Lorraine and Amelia had settled into a comforting routine, their days filled with the gentle tasks of garden care and shared reflection. The past that once loomed large now felt less like a shadow and more like a part of their story complex, but no longer defining. The community's connection to the garden deepened as well, its significance growing beyond a simple project. Neighbors now looked to it as a symbol of resilience and hope, a place where healing was tangible and ongoing. Seasonal gatherings brought everyone together once more, celebrating not just the harvest, but the bonds that had formed among them. It was in these moments of celebration that the true power of the garden revealed itself, a living testament to the human capacity for renewal and connection. The stories shared, the laughter echoed, and the tears shed were all woven into the fabric of this shared space. Lorraine reflected on the journey with a quiet sense of accomplishment and humility. The path had been difficult, marked by moments of doubt and pain, but also by unexpected joy and growth. The note that had sparked this transformation remained, a poignant reminder of how a small gesture can change everything. Lorraine no longer felt isolated by her past, but connected to something larger, a community, a garden, a future she could believe in. The forgiveness she extended to herself and to Amelia had opened doors to a new life, one filled with possibility and grace. Amelia's growth was equally profound. She had embraced the garden and the community with open arms, finding strength in the bonds she had rebuilt and the new relationships she had forged. The garden had become a source of inspiration and purpose, guiding her toward her dreams and helping her heal wounds that once felt insurmountable. The connection with her mother, while still a work in progress, was stronger and more honest than ever before. Amelia's journey was a testament to the power of patience, compassion, and the willingness to start anew. No matter how daunting the past may be, I often thought about how this entire transformation had sprung from something as simple as watering a neighbor's plants. It was a reminder that kindness, when extended with genuine care, can ripple outward in ways we never anticipate. The garden was not just a collection of flowers and plants. It was a living story of forgiveness, growth, and the enduring strength of human connection. Watching Lorraine and Amelia nurture both the garden and their relationship was a privilege, one that left an indelible mark on my heart and on everyone involved. As the final leaves fell and the garden settled into its winter slumber, Lorraine and Amelia prepared for the next chapter of their lives. Plans to continue expanding the garden, to deepen the community's involvement, and to nurture the relationships that had blossomed were underway. Their journey was far from over, but the foundation they had built was strong-rooted in love, forgiveness, and a shared vision for the future. The garden, born from a simple note, had become a beacon of hope, reminding all who saw it that even the smallest acts can change everything. Looking back on this incredible journey, I felt a profound sense of gratitude and awe. The story of Lorraine and Amelia was a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of kindness. It was a reminder that no matter how broken or lost we may feel, there is always a path forward, one paved with patience, understanding, and love. Their garden stood as a symbol of that truth, a living legacy that would continue to inspire and heal for years to come. Winter had wrapped the neighborhood in a soft, silencing blanket of snow, transforming the familiar streets and homes into a quiet, reflective world. The garden, now resting beneath the frost, held within it the memories of every season it had, witnessed the tender shoots of spring, the radiant colors of summer, and the warm glow of autumn's embrace. Lorraine and Amelia's journey, much like the garden itself, had undergone cycles of growth and dormancy, of struggle and renewal. The story that began with a simple request to water some plants had blossomed into something far greater, a testament to resilience, forgiveness, and the power of human connection. Though the garden lay dormant, the bond between Lorraine and Amelia was alive and thriving, nurtured by months of shared effort and mutual understanding. Their relationship, once fractured by years of pain and distance, had become a source of strength and hope. They had learned to communicate openly, to listen without judgment, and to embrace the imperfections that made their story uniquely theirs. The note left on the doorstep, initially a small plea for help, had opened a door to healing neither could have anticipated. It was a reminder that sometimes the simplest acts of kindness have the most profound impact. The neighborhood continued to feel the ripples of this transformation. What had started as a personal journey had blossomed into a communal experience, weaving connections between neighbors and fostering a spirit of cooperation and care. The garden had become a symbol of renewal, a place where people came not just to nurture plants, but to nurture one another. Seasonal events brought the community together, celebrating life's cycles and the bonds formed through shared experience. The garden's quiet beauty was a backdrop to countless stories of growth, healing, and hope. Lorraine and Amelia's dreams for the garden remained alive, even in winter's quiet. They planned to expand the garden's reach, to create spaces that welcomed all who sought comfort and connection. Their vision included educational programs, art installations, and quiet places for reflection, each element designed to nurture both the earth and the human spirit. They hoped the garden would continue to be a living legacy, a beacon for anyone seeking solace or friendship. The note that once changed everything was now a symbol of possibility, proof that even in the darkest seasons, life finds a way to flourish. Reflecting on the journey, I realized how much this story had touched me. It was a powerful reminder of the human capacity for kindness, forgiveness, and growth. Lorraine and Amelia's experience showed that no matter how difficult the past, there was always a chance to start anew, to build bridges where walls once stood. The garden was a living testament to that truth, a place where healing was not just possible, but inevitable when nurtured with patience and love. Their story was far from over, but it had already left a lasting imprint, a legacy of hope that would inspire all who heard it. As the snowflakes drifted softly onto the sleeping garden, I knew that the story of Lorraine and Amelia was a beacon for anyone who has ever struggled to heal, to forgive, or to reconnect. It was proof that kindness can break through the hardest barriers, that love in its many forms is worth fighting for, and that sometimes the smallest gestures can change everything. The garden's story would continue to grow with each passing season, a timeless reminder that even the quietest places can hold the most powerful stories. Despite the peaceful routine that had settled over the garden and their lives, Lorraine often found herself wrestling with a storm of emotions she rarely voiced aloud. One late evening, as twilight stretched its quiet hues across the sky, she sat alone on the worn wooden bench beneath the old oak tree, the cool air whispering through the branches like a gentle confidant. The garden, usually a source of calm, seemed to reflect the turmoil inside her, but fragile, shaped by years of hardship and hope. She thought about the note that had sparked this whole journey, how such a small act of reaching out had broken down walls she thought were impenetrable. Yet even now, shadows of regret lingered. Lorraine's mind drifted to the years she had spent apart from Amelia, the missed birthdays, the silent dinners, the unspoken apologies that hung heavy in the air. There were moments she wanted to rewind, to undo the mistakes and the distance that had grown between them. But life doesn't offer second chances so easily, and she had learned that some wounds take time to heal, if they ever fully do. She felt the weight of guilt settle deep in her chest, a constant reminder of the pain her absence had caused. Yet beneath that guilt was a flicker of gratitude for the note, for the garden, for the chance to rebuild what had once seemed lost forever. As the stars began to twinkle above, Lorraine allowed herself to be vulnerable for the first time in a long while. She spoke softly, as if sharing a secret with the night itself, about her fears that this fragile peace might shatter, that the past might come crashing back in and undo all they had worked for. She confessed her doubts about whether forgiveness was truly possible, or if it was just an illusion she clung to. Yet even as she questioned, she felt a cautious hope take root, a belief that love, even when flawed and complicated, had the power to heal and transform. The garden, with its delicate blooms and resilient roots, had taught her that sometimes growth comes from pain and beauty from struggle. In that quiet moment, Lorraine made a silent promise to herself and to Amelia. She vowed to cherish the present, to nurture their renewed connection with patience and honesty, and to face whatever challenges lay ahead with an open heart. The journey was far from over, but she was no longer alone.
Out the garden.
The garden had brought her more than just companionship, had given her courage. And as the night deepened, she found solace in the knowledge that even the smallest gestures, like watering plants or leaving a note, could change the course of a lifetime. Amelia stood at the edge of the garden as the first pale light of dawn crept across the sky, casting a soft glow over the plants she had helped nurture into life. The chill of the early morning air wrapped around her like a quiet embrace, grounding her as her thoughts swirled with the journey she and Lorraine had traveled, the path from silence and estrangement to fragile but growing forgiveness. That note she had left on Lorraine's doorstep weeks ago had been a simple request, but beneath it lay a deeper plea, yearning for connection, a desire to heal wounds that had long festered beneath layers of pain and misunderstanding. As she looked around the garden now, blooming softly in the gentle light, Amelia realized that forgiveness was not a moment, but a process, one that demanded constant courage and vulnerability. It was about facing the past honestly, but never allowing it to imprison her or dictate her future. Her footsteps were slow and deliberate as she walked through the garden, brushing her fingers lightly over the leaves and petals that had sprung from the earth with their care and attention. Each plant, each bloom, was a living symbol of their effort, not just physical labor, but emotional healing. The garden had become a reflection of her own soul, showing both the scars she carried and the strength she had gained by embracing her pain rather than running from it. Amelia's heart swelled with gratitude, not only for this tangible growth, but for the invisible threads of love and forgiveness weaving between her and Lorraine. She had learned that healing was rarely neat or linear. It was messy and slow, requiring patience and self-compassion. Yet with every day, she felt more certain that this was the beginning of something lasting, something real. Amelia paused beneath the grand oak tree, the same tree where Lorraine had sat the night before, wrestling with her own doubts and fears. Here, amid the quiet rustling leaves, Amelia found clarity, the promise they had made to one another to cherish the present moment and face the future side by side was not just words, but a lifeline. It was a commitment grounded in honesty, humility, and grace, a pledge to build a relationship not defined by past mistakes, but by mutual respect and acceptance. Love, Amelia realized, was not about perfection or forgetting the hurts inflicted, but about embracing the imperfect humanity of the person before you. It was in this acceptance that true freedom lived, the freedom to love without fear, to be vulnerable without shame. The garden was more than a patch of earth to cultivate. It was a sanctuary where stories like theirs could find root and flourish. Amelia envisioned a future where this place would be a beacon for others, a haven where broken hearts could mend, where forgiveness could blossom, and where people could learn to open their arms to new possibilities. She dreamed of workshops and gatherings where neighbors would come not only to tend to plants, but to share stories of struggle and triumph, creating a tapestry of resilience woven from many lives. The note that had once seemed so small and fragile was now the seed of something far greater, symbol of hope and transformation that extended well beyond their own experience. Though the future was uncertain and challenges surely awaited, Amelia felt a renewed sense of strength and optimism. The past, with all its pain and regret, no longer held dominion over her life. Instead, it had become a teacher, offering lessons in compassion, forgiveness, and the power of connection. She understood that true healing required more than just words or gestures. It demanded ongoing effort and the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Yet she also knew she was not alone. With Lorraine by her side and the community surrounding them, she felt anchored and supported. Together, they had created not just a garden, but a living testament to the resilience of the human spirit. As the sun rose higher, bathing the garden in golden light, Amelia closed her eyes and breathed deeply, savoring the peace she had found. In this moment, she allowed herself to feel the quiet joy of a heart mended and a future bright with promise. The journey that began with a simple note had carried her far through sorrow and hope, loss and renewal, silence and conversation. And while she knew the road ahead would have its twists and turns, she was ready to walk it with courage, love, and an open heart. For sometimes the smallest acts, a note left on a doorstep, a hand extended in kindness, have the power to change everything, to heal the deepest wounds, and to light the way toward new beginnings. The garden was their story, alive and growing. A reminder that even in the darkest seasons, life finds a way to bloom. As Amelia lingered a little longer beneath the branches of the oak tree, she found herself reflecting not only on her own growth, but on the delicate balance of life itself, the way that seasons change and cycles repeat. How endings and beginnings are forever intertwined. She thought about the fragility of trust, the courage it takes to rebuild what was broken, and the resilience required to open one's heart again after years of guarded silence. It was humbling to realize how much strength could be found in vulnerability, and how healing was not a destination but a journey walked one day at a time. The garden, with its gentle blooms and deep roots, was a perfect metaphor for this truth. In nurturing the earth, she had learned to nurture herself. In caring for another, she had rediscovered her own capacity for love and forgiveness. The soft hum of the neighborhood waking up around her reminded Amelia that she was part of something bigger, a community of lives intersecting, stories overlapping, hearts healing together. The garden was no longer just a space between two homes. It was a living symbol of the connections that sustain us all. Amelia smiled, imagining the day when this small corner of the world would blossom into a sanctuary, not just for plants, but for people seeking hope and renewal. And she knew without a doubt that the note that had changed everything was not just a moment in time, but a seed planted deeply in the soil of their lives, a seed that would continue to grow, nourish, and inspire for years to come. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload. From us.